Hello, everybody. It's Jeremiah with Man with a Mug. I'm really glad you're here. I'm all out of tea because I've been recording episodes back to back and now I'm done. So this is going to be ornamental now. But, dude, this episode, I'm excited because I'm going to start a new book. I'm going to keep reading Aesop's Fables and Walden, don't get me wrong. And we're going to go all the way through them. But I wanted to start a third one because recently I was given some advice. Maybe I will just put this away. I'm going to knock it over if I don't think about it. I was given some advice um, about reading. Like, for those of you who don't know me in person, I'm a huge reader. I love reading. I've always loved it for as long as I can remember. Um, Anything. It could be fiction. It could be biographies. It could be something like economics, history. It's just whatever interests me at the time. And that's why in my first welcome video, I showed you kind of the family library over here. If you ever want a more personal tour, let me know. Be happy to. But I anyway, love reading. But recently I was given some advice about reading in general because I sometimes will just lose interest halfway through a book. And I'll be like, well, I don't know if I want to finish this particular one. I want to kind of go over here, something that interests me more. Um, and then I'll read for a little bit. I'll read a couple more books, and then I'll get to a book that might have something to do with that interest, and then it'll flip to a different interest. I don't know where that comes from, why that happens. It just does. But the advice I was given was to be reading three different kinds of books at any given time, like have them on a rotation. One book is to learn, essentially, and that's a nonfiction. That could be business, economics, could be history. I'll include biographies in there, learning the history of great people, their stories, um, something about learning, like to expand your knowledge on a topic or something. The second one is to feel, and that's more fiction. That's usually, and that can include poetry, memoirs of people. I'll put autobiographies in there because that's sometimes more narrative, but generally fiction. Classic lit is in there as well. That's usually where my bread and butter is in terms of what I just enjoy reading. And then the third kind of book is one to ground you, one sort of like philosophical work, one to get you thinking deeper, one to continually come home to and to refine yourself through the reading. So it's philosophy. That can be spirituality. Since I'm a practicing Christian, that can include just books by Christian authors. Um, I don't include the Bible in there because as a Christian, that's kind of above all of that. You read the Bible daily. Um, but so I've realized on this channel that I have one for learning. I kind of threw Walden in the learning one in a weird way because in my mind, it's sort of it's an autobiography, but it's also kind of a snapshot of life in New England in the 1800s. I thought it was in there, at least in terms of what I was reading on this channel. Aesop's Fables, I think, is definitely more philosophical work. It's grounding, so I put that in the ground category. And I realized I didn't have a feeling one. I didn't have anything fiction going on. And the feeling one, I think, is special because that category is for, like I said, for feeling, for understanding emotion. You understand humanity through fiction. You understand storytelling. You understand how people work, how they function, their likes, their dislikes. You get into the mind of the author. And no, there's no better way to do that and to connect to broader humanity as a whole than through fiction, I think. So I wanted to start a new book series, and it is one of my favorites, Sherlock Holmes. I am a huge Sherlock fan. Generally, the fiction, the movies, the TV show, anything Sherlock, I'm diving in. This book in particular, this is the complete works of Sherlock Holmes. I fully intend to go through the entire thing. I mean, I'm kind of down. Now, if you guys aren't interested, we can have a conversation about that. But I'm super interested in it. It's been a couple years since I've read all of them. I'd love to get back into it. And this book, this one in particular, I really love the artwork on it, as you can see, and the background. This specific copy of the book has a very special place in my heart. When my wife and I first met, before we were dating or anything like that, before we really even knew each other, I happened to mention that I had a complete Sherlock Holmes. I don't even know how that came up. We were coworkers at the time. She's like, "Hey, can I borrow that?" Because I'm like, "I like Sherlock too." She said, "Can I please borrow this book? I have actually wanted to read through the whole series for a long time." She hadn't read all of it. I said, "Sure, why not?" So This was almost probably the anchor to what kept both of us coming back to each other generally more than coworkers. We started to be friends outside of work, and then one thing led to another. So this is the copy that I gave to my now wife at the time. It was just coworker, and I don't know if I would credit this book specifically to the forming of the marriage in our family now, but I don't know. I think it's special. Anyway, all that being said, I'm being sappy. Sherlock Holmes. Because all of the books I'm going to read on this channel, unless there's an otherwise specified thing where I get demonetized, they're all going to be in the public domain so I don't get copyrighted. So Sherlock Holmes is in the public domain. Walden's in the public domain. Aesop's Fables, of course, is in the public domain. So any book that I read, whether it's learning, whether it's fiction, whether it's grounding, the intention is for all that to be in the public domain. Again, there may be exceptions to that in the future, but I don't want to get copyrighted, striked, or anything like that on YouTube. So keeping it public, baby. Complete Sherlock Holmes. We are going to start with number one, Sherlock Holmes. It is a study in Scarlet. This was the first Sherlock Holmes full-length novel, and I believe this was the first one that he wrote. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. I think. I might need to brush up on that, but I love the artwork in here. Study in Scarlet. It's a good time. So this is Sherlock Holmes, A Study in Scarlet, Part 1, Chapter 1. Part 1, being a reprint from the reminiscences of John H. Watson, M.D., late of the Army Medical Department. Chapter 1, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. In the year, by the way, I'm not going to do British accent. Not even going to try. I'm very American. I probably can't do it very well. Half as good, or half as well, I should say, as an English narrator. So if you want someone to read Sherlock Holmes with an English accent, which I think is probably the way to do it, to be honest, go find someone else to do it. It's not going to be me. Anyway, Chapter 1, Mr. Sherlock Holmes. In the year 1878, I took my degree of Doctor of Medicine at the University of London and proceeded to Netley to go through the course prescribed for surgeons in the Army. Having completed my studies there, I was duly attached to the 5th Northumberland Fusiliers as assistant surgeon. The regiment was stationed in India at the time, and before I could join it, the Second Afghan War had broken out. On landing at Bombay, I learned that my corps had advanced through the passes and was already deep in the enemy's country. I followed, however, with many other officers who were in the same situation as myself, and succeeded in reaching Kandahar in safety, where I found my regiment and at once entered upon my new duties. The campaign brought honors and promotion to many, but for me it had nothing but misfortune and disaster. I was removed from my brigade and attached to the Berkshires, with whom I served at the fatal battle of Maiwand. There I was struck on the shoulder by a Giselle bullet, which shattered the bone and grazed the subclavian artery. I should have fallen into the hands of the murderous Ghazis had it not been for the devotion and courage shown by Murray, my orderly, who threw me across a pack horse and succeeded in bringing me safely to the British lines. Warm with pain and weak from the prolonged hardships which I had undergone, I was removed with a great train of wounded sufferers to the base hospital at Peshawar. Here I rallied, and had already improved so far as to be able to walk about the wards, and even to bask a little upon the veranda, when I was struck down by enteric fever, that curse of our Indian possessions. For months my life was despaired of, and when at last I came to myself and became convalescent, I was so weak and emaciated that a medical board determined that not a day should be lost in sending me back to England. I was dispatched accordingly in the troop ship Orontes, and landed a month later on Portsmouth Jetty, with my health irretrievably ruined, but with permission from my paternal government to spend the next 9 months in attempting to improve it. I had neither kith nor kin in England, and was therefore as free as air, or as free as an income of 11 shillings and 6 pence a day will permit a man to be. Under such circumstances, I naturally gravitated to London, that great cesspool into which all the loungers and idlers of the empire are irresistibly drained. There I stayed for some time at a private hotel in the Strand, leading a comfortless, meaningless existence, and spending such money as I had, considerably more freely than I ought. So alarming did the state of my finances become that I soon realized that I must either leave the metropolis and rusticate somewhere in the country, or that I must make a complete alteration in my style of living. Choosing the latter alternative, I began by making up my mind to leave the hotel and take up my quarters in some less pretentious. I think I got a fly. Excuse me. I began by making up my mind to leave the hotel and take up my quarters in some less pretentious and less expensive domicile. On the very day that I come to this conclusion, I was standing at the Criterion bar when someone tapped me on the shoulder, and turning around, I recognized young Stamford, who had been a dresser under me at Bart's. The sight of a friendly face in the great wilderness of London is a pleasant thing indeed to a lonely man. In old days, Stamford had never been a particular crony of mine, but now I hailed him with enthusiasm, and he, in his turn, appeared to be delighted to see me. In the exuberance of my joy, I asked him to lunch with me at the Holborn, and we started off together in a hansom. "Whatever have you been doing with yourself, Watson?" he asked in undisguised wonder, as we rattled through the crowd of London streets. "You're as thin as a lath and brown as a nut." I gave him a short sketch of my adventures, and he hardly concluded it by the time that we reached our destination. "Poor devil," he said commiseratingly, after he had listened to my misfortunes. "What are you up to now?" "Looking for lodgings," I answered, "trying to solve the problem as to whether it is possible to get comfortable rooms at a reasonable price." "That's a strange thing," remarked my companion. "You are the second man today that has used that expression to me." "And who was the first?" I asked. "A fellow who was working at the chemical laboratory up at the hospital. He was bemoaning himself this morning because he could not get someone to go halves with him in some nice rooms which he had found, and which were much too, which, and which were too much for his purse." That was a mouthful. "By Jove," I cried, "if he really wants someone to share the rooms with and the expense, I'm the very man for him. I should prefer having a partner to being alone." Young Stamford looked rather strangely. Wow, I really stumbled over that one. Young Stamford looked rather strangely at me over his wine glass. "You don't know Sherlock Holmes yet," he said. "Perhaps you would not care for him as a constant companion." "Why? What is there against him?" "Oh, I didn't say there was anything against him. He is a little queer in his ideas, an enthusiast in some branches of science. As far as I know, he's a decent fellow enough." "A medical student, I suppose?" said I. "No, I have no idea what he intends to go in for. I believe he's well up in anatomy, and he's a first-class chemist, but as far as I know, he's never taken out any systematic medical classes. His studies are very desultory and eccentric, but he has amassed a lot of the out-of-the-way knowledge which would astonish his professors." "Did you ever ask him what he was going in for?" I asked. "No, he's not a man that it's easy to draw out, though he can be communicative enough when the fancy seizes him." "I should like to meet him," I said. "If I am to lodge with anyone, I should prefer a man of studious and quiet habits. I'm not strong enough yet to stand much noise or excitement. I've had enough of both in Afghanistan to last me for the remainder of my natural existence. How can I meet this friend of yours?" "He is sure to be at the laboratory," returned my companion. "He either avoids the place for weeks, or else he works there from morning till night. If you like, we'll drive around together after luncheon." "Certainly," I answered, and the conversation drifted away into other channels. As we made our way to the hospital after leaving the Holborn, Stamford gave me a few more particulars about the gentleman whom I proposed to take as a fellow lodger. "You mustn't blame me if you don't get on with him," he said. "I know nothing more of him than I have learned from meeting him occasionally in the laboratory. You proposed this arrangement, so you must not hold me responsible." "If we don't get on, it'll be easy to part company," I answered. "It seems to me, Stamford," I added, looking hard at my companion, "that you have some reason for washing your hands of the matter. Is this fellow's temper so formidable, or what is it? Don't be mealy-mouthed about it." "It is not easy to express the inexpressible," he answered with a laugh. "Holmes is a little too scientific for my tastes. It approaches to cold-bloodedness. I can imagine him giving a friend a little pinch of the latest vegetable alkaloid, not out of malevolence, you understand, but simply out of a spirit of inquiry in order to have an accurate idea of the effects. To do him justice, I think he would take it himself with the same readiness. He appears to have a passion for definite and exact knowledge. Very right, too. Yes, but it may be pushed to excess. When it comes to beating the subjects in the dissecting rooms with a stick, it is certainly taking rather a bizarre shape." "Beating the subjects?" "Yes, to verify how far bruises may be produced after death. I saw him at it with my own eyes." "And yet you say he's not a medical student?" "No. Heaven knows what the objects of his studies are. But here we are, and you must form your own impressions about him." And as he spoke, we turned down a narrow lane and passed through a small side door, which opened into a wing of the great hospital. It was familiar ground to me, and I needed no guiding as we ascended the bleak stone staircase and made our way down the long corridor, with its vista of whitewashed wall and dun-colored doors. Near the farther end of a low-arched passage branched away from it and led to a chemical laboratory. This was a lofty chamber, lined and littered with countless bottles. Broad, low tables were scattered about, which bristled with retorts, test tubes, and little Bunsen lamps with their blue, flickering flames. There was only one student in the room, who was bending over a distant table absorbed in his work. At the sound of our steps, he glanced round and sprang to his feet with a cry of pleasure. "I found it! I found it!" he shouted to my companion. running towards us with a test tube in his hand. I have found a reagent which is precipitated by hemoglobin, and by nothing else. Had he discovered a gold mine, greater delight could not have shone upon his features. Dr. Watson, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, said Stamford, introducing us. How are you? He said cordially, gripping my hand with a strength for which I should hardly have given him credit. You've been in Afghanistan, I perceive. How on earth did you know that? I asked in astonishment. Never mind, said he, chuckling to himself. The question now is about hemoglobin. No doubt you see the significance of this discovery of mine? It is interesting, chemically, no doubt, I answered. But practically, why, man is the most practical mediological discovery for years. Medico-legal discovery for years. Wow, I butchered that one. Don't you see that it gives us an infallible test for bloodstains? Come over here now. He seized me by the coat sleeve in his eagerness and drew me over to the table at which he had been working. Let us have some fresh blood, he said, digging a long bodkin into his finger and drawing off the resulting drop of blood in a conical pipette. Now I add this small quantity of blood to a liter of water. You perceive that the resulting mixture has the appearance of pure water. The proportion of blood cannot be more than 1 in a million. I have no doubt, however, that we shall be able to obtain the characteristic reaction. As he spoke, he flew into the vessel a few white crystals, and then added some drops of a transparent fluid. In an instant, the contents assumed a dull mahogany color, and a brownish dust was precipitated to the bottom of the glass jar. "Ah!" he cried, clapping his hands, and looking as delighted as a child with a new toy. What do you think of that? It seems to be a very delicate test, I remarked. Beautiful, beautiful. The old Guicum test is very clumsy and uncertain. So is the microscopic examination for blood corpuscles. The latter is valueless if the stains are a few hours old. Now this appears to act as well whether the blood is old or new. Had this test been invented, there are hundreds of men now walking the earth who would have long ago have paid the penalty of their crimes. Indeed, I murmured. Criminal cases are continually hinging upon that one point. A man is suspected of a crime months, perhaps, after it has been committed. His linen and clothes are examined and brownish stains discovered upon them. Are they blood stains, or mud stains, or rust stains, or fruit stains, or what are they? That is a question which has puzzled many an expert, and why? Because there is no reliable test. Now we have the Sherlock Holmes test, and there will be no longer any difficulty. His eyes fairly glittered as he spoke, and he put his hand over his heart and bowed as if to some applauding crowd conjured up by his imagination. You are to be congratulated, I remarked, considerably surprised at his enthusiasm. There was the case of von Bischoff at Frankfurt last year. He would certainly have been hung had this test been in existence. Then there was Mason of Bradford and the notorious Muller, and Lefebvre of Montpellier, and Sampson of New Orleans. I could name a score of cases in which it would have been decisive. Excuse me, wow. You seem to be a walking calendar of crime, said Stamford with a laugh. You might start a paper on those lines. Call it the Police News of the Past. Very interesting reading that it might be made too, remarked Sherlock Holmes, sticking a small piece of plaster over the prick of his finger. I have to be careful, he continued, turning to me with a smile, for I dabble with poisons a good deal. He held out his hands as he spoke, and I noticed it was all mottled over with similar pieces of plaster and discolored with strong acids. We came here on business, said Stamford, sitting down on a high three-legged stool and pushing another one in my direction with his foot. My friend here wants to take diggings, and as you were complaining that you could get no one to go halves with you, I thought I had better bring you together. Sherlock Holmes seemed delighted at the idea of sharing his rooms with me. I have my eye on a suite on Baker Street, he said, which would suit us down to the ground. You don't mind the smell of strong tobacco, I hope. I always smoke ships myself, I answered. That's good enough. I generally have chemicals about and occasionally do experiments. Would that annoy you? By no means. Let me see. What are my other shortcomings? I get in the dumps at times and don't open my mouth for days on end. You must not think that I insult you when I do that. Just let me alone and I'll soon be right. What have you to confess now? It is just as well for two fellows to know the worst of one another before they begin to live together. I laughed at this cross-examination. I keep a bull pup, I said, and I object to rouse, and I object to rouse because my nerves are shaken, and I get up at all sorts of ungodly hours, and I am extremely lazy. I have another set of vices when I'm well, but those are the principal ones at present. Do you include violin playing in your category of rouse? He asked anxiously. Depends on the player, I answered. A well-played violin is a treat for a gods. A badly played one. Oh, that's all right, he cried with a merry laugh. I think we may consider the thing as settled. That is, if the rooms are agreeable to you. When shall we see them? Call for me here at noon tomorrow, and we'll go together and settle everything, he answered. All right, noon exactly, said I, shaking his hand. We left him working among his chemicals, and we walked together towards my hotel. By the way, I asked suddenly, stopping and turning upon Stamford, How the deuce did he know that I had come from Afghanistan? My companion smiled an enigmatical smile. That's just his little peculiarity, he said. A good many people have wanted to know how he finds things out. Oh, a mystery, is it? I cried, rubbing my hands. This is very piquant. I am much obliged to you for bringing us together. The proper study of mankind is man, you know. You must study him then, Sanford says, as he bade me goodbye. Sanford said, excuse me, it's past tense, as he bade me goodbye. You'll find him a knotty problem, though. I'll wager he learns more about you than you know about him. Goodbye. Goodbye, I answered, and strolled on to my hotel, considerably interested in my new acquaintance. I'm excited. Thanks for tuning in. We'll get chapter 2 next time.